Penguin Random House Audio presents Firstborn Girls, a Memoir by Bernice McFadden. Read for you by Robin Miles, with the notes and acknowledgments read by the author. For the firstborn girls who raised me, Thelma, Gwendolyn, Vivian, and Aja. For them and the angel sisters.
Author's note. My first maternal ancestor in this country was the descendant of the African ethnic group called the Bamileke. The Bamileke people lived in the cradle of the world known as Egypt. They fled the land of the pharaohs when Arab Muslims conquered the region, imposing Islam and outlawing the Bamileke spiritual belief system known as ancestor veneration. Over a millennium, the Bamileke people traveled southwest across the continent of Africa, through deserts and jungles, across rivers and lakes, until they settled in countries that we now know as Nigeria, Cameroon, Congo, Benin, and Togo. Some of my ancestors built boats that carried them across the ocean to America, where they mixed and mingled and traded and copulated with the indigenous population. Still others were brought here by Europeans against their will in chains and shackles. However they arrived, my ancestors planted themselves deep into the soil and soul of this country. This is a story of my family. This is a story of America. This is a work of autoethnography. This is necessary work. This is love work. This is legacy literature about me and mine, born into a world run by them and theirs.
I am writing with my burnt hand about the nature of fire. Ingeborg Bachmann. Prologue. Prelude to a life. Some women are lost in the fire. Some women are built from it. Michelle K. The first thing I want to tell you is that on September 27th, 1967, I died. I was 2 years and 1 day old. 2 days before my death, my mother Vivian and I flew from New York to Cleveland, Ohio to visit James Forrest and his wife Julia. I was a little bald-headed toddler, and my mother was 24 years old, with cover girl good looks. When Vivian was a child, her mother Thelma had been romantically involved in a relationship with James Forrest that was as passionate as it was violent. It was a vicious cycle, one that Vivian would relive in her own marriage. However, by 1967, James and Thelma's turbulent history was like water under the bridge. The former lovers were friendly now, telephoning each other on birthdays and holidays to share news about some person they'd both known who'd hit the number, got married, had a baby, gone to jail, or died. I suppose they stayed connected because they had history. History, if you don't know, is a hard thing to shake because it's as bonding as glue. They'd stayed connected because of their viscid history, but also because James had been like a father to Vivian, who had never had one. When James learned that Vivian had married and had had a child, he sent for the two of us to come to Cleveland so that he could wrap his arms around us both. "Bring that baby up here so I can smell her head." That's how I ended up celebrating my second birthday in Cleveland, Ohio, with Thelma's old flame, his wife, and my mother. On the afternoon of the 26th, everyone gathered around the white Formica kitchen table. I was seated in Vivian's lap, dressed in a pink frilly dress and colorful party hat. After they sang Happy Birthday, Vivian held me a safe distance from the flame dancing atop the white candle shaped in the form of the number 2. "Blow, Bernice, blow!" The flame buckled and died, and then I plunged my hands into the cake and shoveled the creamy sweetness into my mouth. There was a lot of joy in that room, but there was sadness too. We should have been celebrating at home with my father, Robert, as a family. I suspect that our trip to Cleveland was more than just a visit to catch up with old friends and family. I suspect this was one of my mother's early prison breaks. James and his wife lived just a few short hours away from Detroit, Michigan. Vivian hadn't been back to that city since she and Thelma had moved to Brooklyn back in the 50s. She had planned to take a bus from Cleveland to Detroit to visit her great-uncle Richard, great-aunt Lula May, and their children. When James heard her plans, he scoffed. "I can't let you take my grandbaby on no filthy goddamn bus." James's concern was less about the cleanliness of the bus and more about whether Vivian and I would have an easy egress from the city should tempers re-erupt. 2 months earlier, on July 23, 1967, Detroit exploded in one of the deadliest and most destructive race rebellions the country had ever seen. Over 5 days and nights, 43 people were killed, 33 of whom were black. More than 7,200 people were arrested. Most of them were black too. The last time Detroit tempers flared to that degree was in 1943, the year Vivian was born. During that unrest, 9 whites and 25 blacks were killed. Of those 25, 17 were murdered by the police. America was and remains a powder keg, and often the match that lights the fuse is racism. In 1967, Detroit was just one of nearly 160 uprisings that erupted across the nation that summer. The terror disrupted whole families, including my own. On July 12th, John W. Smith, my maternal first cousin twice removed, was pulled over in his taxicab in Newark, New Jersey, by 2 white police officers. After some back and forth, the officers ripped John from the car, arrested him, and then beat him within an inch of his life. Residents in the area saw the officers drag his limp body from the cruiser into the police station. The spectators assumed he was dead, and the notion spread like fever. Soon, the police station was surrounded by a mass of angry people, chanting, "Show us John Smith! Show us John Smith!" Police officers dressed in riot gear rushed the crowd with billy clubs. In retaliation, rocks and bottles were pelted, and melee ensued. Over 5 nights, businesses were looted, fires were set, 26 people were killed, and 700 people were injured, including a 12-year-old boy named Joe Bass, Jr., whom police shot down in the street for stealing a 12-pack of beer. Life magazine put Bass's image on the cover of their July 28th issue. In the photo, Joe lies crumpled on the blacktop, bleeding from his neck and leg wounds. One arm is folded beneath him, the other bent as if in an embrace. His fingers on both hands are touching. The scene is heartbreaking, hard to shake from my memory, but for some reason I cannot articulate. It's his white Converse sneakers, gray with filth, that dog me. A week ahead of Joe Bass, Jr., my cousin John Smith, called J.W., graced the cover of Time magazine. Unkempt afro, cheeks covered in 5 o'clock shadow, mustache and soul patch in need of a trim. He is looking away from the camera, eyes focused on something or someone just out of frame. When he made the cover, phones jangled in houses and apartments of my family members all across the country. "Hey, y'all know J.W.'s on the cover of Time magazine? Mary Emma's boy is on the cover of Time magazine. Rosie May's grandson is on Time magazine." Thelma bought a copy from the newspaper stand outside the Manhattan office building where she worked as a cleaning woman. She made it a point to tell the white man behind the counter that the black man on the cover was her cousin. In the building.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?